Well, great evening, everyone. Glad to see that you're back. I'm William Battle, adjunct professor at Bowie State University, president, founder of Emmanuel Health Education Incorporated, and also a community member of the Community Engagement Dissemination core of the Hopkins Center for Health Disparities. A few things I just want to share about the community workshop. As agents of change in our community, today's platform will provide us with an audience that will be able to share some of the mental and emotional issues that we share in the community at the ground level. And secondly, it engages a conversation about how to successfully build a relationship among researchers and the community. Today's workshop will be narrated by one of our CDEC members, and we will have two panelists that are two well-seasoned activists on board with us this afternoon, sharing their information. So let me proceed with the introductions. My first person I want to introduce is Reverend Alma D. Savoy. Reverend Savoy is an ordained minister of the gospel and church administrator of the Greater Beulah Baptist Church in Capitol Heights, Maryland. She is a retired school guidance counselor and a teacher after 25 years. Reverend Savoy was able to combine her passion for education and her mission to equip, empower her brothers and sisters to a more abundant, healthier lifestyle when her church was invited to participate in the University of Maryland Public School Public Health Men's Prostate Cancer Church Training and Project HEAL Cancer Research Project. Currently, Reverend Savoy is serving as Community Ministries of Prince George's County's Step Up Housing Assistant Officer, in which she assists with overwhelming number of persons seeking emergency assistance to pay for their utilities and rental bills due to high negative impact on corona pandemic closures. Our second guest, or our second season panelist, is Mr. Jimmy Slade. He's a retired colonel and current executive director of Community Ministries of Prince George's County. It's a faith-based organization that provides basic human services, assistance, and community engagement in health and education research. Mr. Slade has achieved success as a co-investigator and community partner with the School of Public Health, University of Maryland, and with the Johns Hopkins Center to reduce cancer disparities in developing and conducting cancer research and education projects focused on prostate, breast, and colorectal cancers. He's also the director of community engagement and dissemination core of Hopkins Center for Health Disparities, a founding member of the Maryland Community Research Advisory Board, University of Maryland for Health Equity. He chairs the Johns Hopkins Center to Reduce Cancer Disparities, sponsored by the Prince George's County Community Advisory Group. And he's also a founding member of the executive director of the newly formed Coalition Prostate Cancer Awareness, District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia. And then finally, we have our moderator, Dr. Tatiana Y. Warren. Dr. Warren is a teacher, author, and trainer, innovator, and CEO and founder of Just Tati. And Just Tati stands for Teacher, Author, Trainer, Innovator. The organization her primary mission is to end needless suffering to underserved individuals and communities. Currently, Dr. Tati serves as co-leader to the Community Engagement and Dissemination Core Advisory Board at Hopkins Center for Health Disparity Solutions. Her training, coupled with her faith in Jesus, has equipped her with the building blocks to incorporate public health approaches in promoting healthy lifestyles holistically, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Dr. Tati wishes to establish a program of research not only informs public policy, but also eventually becomes a nationally disseminated model for improving health in populations more or most affected by elderly women or ethnic minorities by health disparities. So it gives me great pleasure to present to you this afternoon the community workshop. Dr. Tati Warren, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Will, again for that introduction. I'm so excited for this community panel discussion that we're going to have this afternoon. So I hope you guys can shake off, shake your shoulders off, shake a leg, and join us in this dialogue. 2020 in a nutshell has been centered around having difficult conversations, uncomfortable conversations, and dealing with uncomfortable things. And so, figuring out action plans that make things better, not only for our university partners who are joining us on today, but also our community partners, are very is very important and crucial at this time. Dr. Ann, our keynote speaker, earlier posed this question to us, and she said, what has been the impact of the work that you're doing, and what will be the impact 20 years from now moving forward? And so I want to jump into a quick video. And before we show this video that kind of illustrates what some of our academic partners have to do to show um, impact within their profession, I do want to preface that this illustration does not represent all of our academic partners, but it does speak to exactly what Dr. Ann shared earlier. So Chantel, take it away.
At a university with brilliant professors who do amazing research, but many of these professors are only worried about getting another publication on their vita to make it longer and thus more impressive. These professors are not focused on how their research can impact our communities. But it's not their fault. A professor's journey starts with tenure, and it creates a publish or perish mentality that universities across this country perpetuate. But I believe that with unlikely collaborations, we can solve this problem. But first, I have to illustrate for you how the academy functions for most people. Meet PhD student Michael Burns. He is starting graduate school and he has impeccable taste in ties. Michael thinks he can change the world now that he's going to get a PhD. He's cute, right? Michael starts taking classes, and he is repeatedly told it is not the impact of your research that matters, but if it's published in an academic journal that hardly anyone reads. As he continues, he starts to learn that PhD students have to publish before they even graduate, or they will not get a tenure track job, which is basically a permanent position at a university. He also realizes that tenure at most universities is primarily determined by publications. Michael begins to stress out and question his life choices. But Michael continues on. He takes his classes, he works on his dissertation, works on his comprehensive exams, all while teaching. And on top of this, he's trying to conduct research and publish it while learning the process so he can earn a living after he graduates. Michael doesn't sleep much. Michael actually begins to panic regularly because you can only submit your journals to one, or your articles to one journal at a time. And it takes months for them to review it. And it's oftentimes rejected by anonymous reviewers who give very little feedback on how to improve your research. It's really helpful, by the way. But after more rejections than Michael can count, he finally sees a few publications. And he's hopeful that the publication process will be easier after graduate school. Silly Michael. But Michael finally does graduate. He's now Dr. Burns. Yeah, I'll take that. And Dr. Burns is hopeful that life as a professor with a paycheck above the poverty line, grad students know what I'm talking about, will give him relief. Dr. Burns is wrong. Tenure-track faculty have up to 5 years to prove they are worthy of a permanent position at their university, and this is primarily determined by the number of publications they earn. This causes many professors to do research with quick turnaround And because of this pressure, many are not doing research projects that could help our communities because it takes too much time.
So it takes too much time. We have Reverend Savoy joining us today. And Reverend Savoy, you are a community leader, community activist at heart, and you have seen a lot of things during this trying time, specifically as it pertains to the public health crisis around housing and how COVID-19 and its challenges has impacted the community psychosocially. So, can you share with us what is it that takes too much time? What are you seeing boots on the ground?
Well, first of all, let me just thank you and everyone for the opportunity to be able to share in this work that I have been doing for the past actually couple of months. And as we look at my area of housing and rental assistance, I think what we're seeing, first of all, is we're seeing a group of people who don't experience life the way most people experience life or the dominant culture experiences life. And I think what we see and what we're hearing is them saying, I want to be heard. I mean, we're seeing the single mom who is saying, I'm working all I can now. I've been laid off, I've been furloughed. I'm working all I can now to pay my rent so that I'm not evicted. And I owe $5,000 in back rent from the time that I wasn't able to work. And I don't know how I'm going to keep a roof over me and my child's head. You know, we're seeing the single mom with 3 toddlers who's saying, you know, I had to give up my job because the daycare center closed and I had to come home with my children. And so now I don't know how I'm going to keep a roof over our head. So we're seeing a group of renters, specifically that I'm working with, who don't know how they're going to keep a roof over their head, who's facing eviction and facing the emotional challenges that comes with losing your home, which ends up being a matter of 3 choices. If I lose my home, I'm either going to have to double up with a family member, which chances are they live in an apartment and I can't do that. And plus this is, COVID-19, we're in this pandemic. The other choice is becoming homeless or, trying to find another place to live. And if I am evicted because I owe 5 back rent, to get another place to live means I have to have twice as much money as I need to get a new place. So we're seeing a group of young people and some old people who this pandemic, as it has been said, has exacerbated a bigger problem of affordable homes. We're seeing renters who pay 49 to 51% of their income in rent. And so when you fall behind in that, and it's particularly if you haven't, if you've been laid off or, you've been impacted by COVID-19 closure, something like that, who can't pay their rent. And so they're facing this emotional turmoil of how am I going to keep a roof over my head? So I see 2 things in terms of they want to be heard and they want to be helped. We're seeing renters who are trying to make a small payment every time they get paid, say twice a month, on an arrearage that they accumulated. And it's hard for them to keep up and be current in their rent. So they're saying we're going to need help. It's no way that I'm going to be able to pay this, maintain rent, and then maintain the bills and things that got behind when when I was off from work. So we need some help. We have to, we're going to have to help in some way renters as well as landlords. It can't be wiped out because then there are landlords who have mortgages and expenses as well. So we're seeing renters and we're seeing persons who saying we need help.
Thank you, Reverend Savoy. I hear that you say the renters need to be heard and they need
Yeah.
to be helped. So we have researchers joining us today. We, of course, have funders joining us today. What are some of the ways that we can actually help the renters um, emotionally, because you spoke of that aspect, as well as practically in the risk of being evicted from their homes?
Okay. I would say emotionally, I think the current moratorium that the CDC has in place in terms of eviction, no eviction protection until the end of the year, offers some relief. It also brings a certain level of stress because the declaration says that at the end of the year, you might have to pay everything that has accumulated. So, while it brings temporary relief for now until the end of the year, they're asking questions as well. Well, what happens at the end of the year when I still can't pay and I'm getting further behind? So I think that's an area where we need the researchers. We need someone other than ourselves to look at and say, how can we help in that, in that area? One political party and the stimulus package that was proposed had, I think, about $1 billion they proposed for rental assistance, to help with programs for rental assistance. Well, and the other parties, I think, package included a smaller amount. But both of those are stalled, right now, so that we don't know what's going to happen. But I think there's going to have to be some intervention in terms of rental assistance, public dollars for rental assistance. And emotionally, just I think knowing that someone is looking into it, someone is going to help, and someone and the fact that we respect and we understand. I don't know how many of us can relate to what it must be like going to bed every night realizing that you might not have a home in a month. If your landlord decides, I'm going to give you a 30-day notice and you have to go, what that must be like emotionally to live like that. What it must be like to live emotionally knowing that I owe $6,000 in back rent. I'm not going to be able to pay that and keep up with my bills. So I think those are the areas where emotionally we're going to need help and figuring out, and as well as with the financial assistance.
Thank you, Reverend Savoy. And you also spoke about the landlords. So, how do we address the emotional conflict of the renter in fear of losing their homes, as well as give consideration to the landlord on verge of financial ruins? Can you discuss that?
Um, yeah, I think you know it's you cannot help the renter and say the landlord, we're not going to help you. For example, we can't just say, well, we'll wipe out all the back rent, and so renters, you don't have to worry about that because we're going to wipe that out. Well, certainly the landlord, they have, some of them are paying mortgages on the property that they're renting, or the expenses that they have on the properties that they're renting. So they are going to need help as well. So that's where I don't have the answer. What? Because you see all this rent that people cannot pay, but yet the landlord, has to be, they have to have some compensation for their property because it's an expense for them. So I don't have the answer. That's why, I'm grateful for the opportunity to share. Maybe someone has the answer, or that's an area for definitely, I think, some research.
You may not have the answer, but how do you foresee our academic institutions supporting our community leaders, supporting our CBOs, our community-based organizations, supporting our faith-based institutions in focusing their research so that we can get the answers, so that we can impact the community? You have all ears here, at least for the next 10 minutes. So,
Okay. Okay. Well, I think, yeah, certainly we do have to go back to the uh, the issue that has been, uh, like I said, exacerbated by uh, low affordable housing. This area, you're either at the kind of at the top or at the very bottom. And when we look at the very bottom, affordable housing is something that is a problem. It is a major issue for finding affordable housing. The rental payments are, more than $1,000 a month, and for a low income person trying to, rent and all the other expenses that they have, it's a problem from the beginning. So I think that's an area. Affordable housing is an area that really needs to be looked into. What can be done to assist? I even hear seniors who have been living here for 25 years, and I've never been behind in my rent. Now I'm behind. But so, to be in a place for 25 years, I think without some kind of security and stability in terms of you probably possibly owning that home. So I think that's an area that really that is the foundation of the crisis that we're in, that really needs to be looked into affordable housing.
thank you, Reverend Savoy. I think that's a good transition to allow Mr. Slade to join in the conversation. Are you there, Mr. Slade?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So you have many years in working and leading community-based organizations and partnerships, specifically between our academic partners and our community leaders. So can you just speak to that, that fostering that relationship to address some of these community concerns, in particular in a time of crisis, but even before COVID-19 ever existed?
Yes, certainly can. And if I can, I would want to commend Reverend Alma Savoy for the work that she's doing. And I want to go back to what Dr. Ann said this morning about both Reverend Savoy and even myself. I am a retired Army colonel after 30 years of service in the U.S. military. After I left the military, I had a stint with government contracting where I served as a vice president of Black Enterprise, probably a top 100 business, and also the world's largest language services company as their federal director. As Dr. Beal said this morning, all of that was good. The military was great. I was doing the things that I think need to be done for national security and so forth. Corporate world, I did extremely well there, earned the highest bonus that the company offered in the first year or so I was there. But I don't have that corporate spirit of overly selfishness. Now, selfish is good, but overly selfish, I can't deal with that. I'm more of a selfless type of person. So given an opportunity to, as my pastor said, to go and work with a nonprofit organization, initially as a board member, I found that to be somewhat satisfying. And I find that I have passion to do this. And I think we have passion to do it not for the compensation. And Reverend Savoy is another example of that. I didn't beg her to come on, but we had some money for housing assistance. We had a position, but we didn't have a person that was willing to take it on. And she came in and she didn't cite for you some of the statistics, but she's dealing with 50 to 75 calls a day asking for assistance. Now, we were blessed with some funds, so we've invested at least $6,000 in the last couple of months of donated funds to us to provide small grants to people to try to keep them somewhat afloat. And also, and so one of the other things we're trying to do, we're trying to get more churches to come online to assist Reverend Savoy, because you can't even talk to 50 to 75 people a day. And we need more churches to accept those direct calls and provide that listening ear that she mentioned, as well as once they do that, they will find some way to provide some of the resources that people may need as well. So with all of that said, if I can kind of transition to a couple of quick prepared comments from Chantel, if that's okay at this time, I'd like to do that.
Wow. Sure, Mr. Slade. While Chantal is getting your slides up, there were two comments for Reverend Savoy. One, Dr. Gaskin said, if the airlines asked for $25 billion from the federal government, how much money do we need to keep these families in their homes? And of course, Dr. Keisha Pollock-Porter said that the housing crisis is going to worsen soon. So Reverend Savoy, you have mentioned what you're mentioning is very common, and there's concerns there. And of course, if anyone else has any questions or comments that they would add, please definitely put them in the chat and we'll make sure that we address them. Mr. Slade, take it back over.
In response to that question, two things. One is that we believe that researchers, even as Dr. Bell also said this morning, while Alma and I are in the trenches fighting this thing, we don't have the time to write about it or to even talk about it. And so we need researchers to come in and document what the situation is and to look at the bigger picture of not only the renters that are in the homes that are losing, but think about all of the advancements that we've made as a people, as Black people, as brown people, as low-income people, how much of that is changing during this period of time. And we will emerge from COVID-19 worse than we would emerge from the last Great Recession if action isn't taken. So we need someone to really study the problem, and we need someone to infuse cash into the renters level, which would infuse cash into the whole system. And as someone said, I don't know how many billions it would take to do that, but the destruction is great as well. A quick view of the model for university research and community members collaboration between Dr. Cheryl Holt at the time, who was an associate professor at the University of Maryland School of Public Health, and myself as a leader of a faith-based nonprofit organization, and our progression in doing that. Next chart, please. As stated earlier, community ministry is a faith-based nonprofit organization that's focused on human services. We were founded by faith leaders in 1973, and we have adapted over the years to meet the needs of the community. And we are adapting right now. We are pivoting right now, as you stated. First, we pivoted in our food program. We pivoted from a fixed restaurant type cafe where we fed free lunches every day with help of 26 organizations, now a community place cafe food assistance program where we provide gift cards, supermarket gift cards to 149 people a week with the help of 16 churches that do so directly with 3 people each, and others donating funds to us, including members of your staff that's donated, and members of other professionals that donated, and Reverend Savoy and I have even donated to keep that going as well. So we think that's an innovative way to expand the food assistance, and we believe if we can implement that in the housing area, it would be an innovative way to at least stem some of the decline that's going on at the present time. Next chart, please. This is a book, an article, journal article that I wrote back in 2018 as the first author on recruitment of African-American churches to participate in cancer early detection, intervention, the community perspective. And that was for the Men's Prostate Awareness Church Training Project that Reverend Savoy mentioned, in which funded by the American Cancer Society, in which Reverend Savoy served as a community health advisor at her church. And I served as the lead recruiter and engager and partner with Dr. Holt in implementing. At the same time, we won a second grant almost within the next couple of weeks on a HEAL prostate, which on HEAL was prostate cancer, breast, colorectal cancer education. And we found ourselves going from just myself doing this to needing to contract a staff of people to help us do it. Next chart, please. And so how do we get there? We got there through Dr. Holt and I met at a community meeting in Seat Pleasant, and we then concluded that we needed to meet, had breakfast together several days at a country breakfast places right out here on Highway 50, which was en route to her going to work at the University of Maryland. And during those meetings, we discussed both of our visions about what we thought we needed to do as a community organization on my behalf, and her perspective from a university researcher in her concern. And we developed a relationship through about 2 or 3 breakfast meetings. And at the end of that, we wrote a small 1-page memorandum of agreement back in December 2008. And that memorandum of agreement has served as the non-legal binding foundation for our relationship since that time. We concluded that I, as the leader of a community-based organization, would lead engagement, recruitment, and retention of participants. And that is basically in first 2 projects at the church level. And it also meant the engagement of people to get letters of support to support the actual application for the grant. And a memorable evening was calling down at Annapolis at a political type meeting, and meeting Bishop Muse, who's also Senator Muse, and saying at 9 o'clock at night, I need letters of support from you. And calling Dr. Holt, which is the only time I've ever called it, kind of during non-duty hours, say, hey, we've got someone who's interested in writing those letters tomorrow. We got strong letters of support from several places. And also that led as part of the application process, but also in my participating in all aspects of the research, from the development of the research question to refinement of the research, and then participating in all aspects of the research, including the analysis of the results, the publications, all of that. She also agreed, as the principal investigator, that she would share resources with community members. And in that case, as I mentioned, my board concluded that we needed to contract people at that time, like later on, Reverend Savoy, who was a contractor with us, when I needed to handle all of these new requirements, I needed to get a team on board quickly. And so we contracted with them to do that. Meanwhile, we have a regular staff that we pay every twice a month, and we're dealing with payday right now. I got timesheets on my desk here. And so she agreed that we would subcontract with my organization somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000–40,000 a year to support that $1.5 million grant that we were able to win for impact. Also, she agreed that she would commit to support the community beyond just the project period. So even after we complete a 5-year project, we stayed up front and we stayed throughout, and even after. If you need us, we'll be there to assist you, provide you information, provide you referrals, those type of things as well. Next chart, please. All of this shows a great deal of respect for the community members. One of the major things you have to have in all of this is trust. And what I realized was that the organization was formed in 1973, and it was all about collaboration. And so for all of those years, we've been establishing and gaining trust in the community. So we lead with human services, and we follow up, as I say, with health and education support. And that trust allows us to reach out to community members and often get support. Never easy. Sometimes it takes a good period of time. And then as a community member, I see my role is also to help us maintain and develop that trust and develop through relationships. So we want to ensure we do all the right things to maintain respect and trust within the community. And we're always looking for new candidates for follow-on projects as well. Next part is as I stated in the article, is the process that we use in recruiting and engaging and retaining people. Getting access to participants is very difficult. And I keep talking about Reverend Savoy, but she found when we were doing HEAL, she said, I can't believe it. I'm a minister, but it takes me 8, 9, 10 calls to get one pastor, one reverend to answer my call. And in my case, it took me 90 days to get my church to sign up for one of the projects. In some other case, you walk out and you meet a pastor and he signs on the spot. So gaining access to participants take a lot, engaging them taking a great deal more. And then you have to introduce the project in such a manner I find, where we have to say it supports what your ministry is, Pastor, and we're here to support you and help you as you work with us in this project. We also seek to avoid cultural issues. Again, in my case, as a male, I find myself ensuring I'm humble in dealing with pastors. I don't want them to get in the point where they're saying, all right, you distribute, 13,000 pounds of produce a month or a week. I distribute 20,000. No, that's not what we're trying to do. We try to focus in on the grant that we're trying to do in the application, and then maintaining that relationship by also providing support to that ministry and sometimes resources. We provide money to churches to have them compensate for lights and those type of things, money for the community health advisors to compensate for their time as well. Next chart, please. The university researcher is doing the same thing. Number one, we've held sessions to gain insights from the community members about what are the issues in their community and what should be the research question, what is important to them, and then let's see if we can find an opportunity to apply for a grant that matches that need. And then we make that open commitment, as I stated before, to the research community, to the churches through that research project. The process that the university goes through is the same as what I go through. Normally, I'm leading the effort to recruit the churches. The university then is leading the effort to recruit what we call the community health advisors or the leaders within those churches, and working with the churches to help them to recruit participants. And Alma Savoy is still on the screen. And when I see what Alma does in her church, I recruit the church. And then when she is a member of that church, she recruits the members of that church to participate in impact and prostate workshops, for example. Next chart. This is one of our early efforts with Men's Prostate Awareness Church Training Focus Group session, determining what the strategy should be for that overall 5-year effort. Next chart, please. This is a National Cancer Institute supported HEAL 5-year efforts on breast, prostate, colorectal cancer. Completed that a good while back. Looking at Sprint, which is an opportunity to figure out how can we scale up HEAL. One group in New York has adopted HEAL and they're implementing it there. For the prostate new grant that community ministers leading, I'm adopting the HEAL curriculum and we're using that for the prostate work as well. Next chart, please. This is some of the material that comes out of HEAL. All of the material that comes out concerning these projects has our community organization and the other community organization as part of it branded on the material as well. Next chart, please. Including this on colorectal cancer as well. Next chart. And next chart. And this is a Johns Hopkins project, which we worked for 5 years on a National Cancer Institute supported project, seeking to work with adults 65 to 74 years of age on cancer compliance. Same cancers we mentioned earlier, plus cervical cancer on this one as well. Next chart, please. And now we're into the HEAL, what we call 2.0, which is we're doing right now, which is ACS supported. How does churches institutionalize health promotion within their church? So we're into the 5th year of that as well. Next chart. And this is an effort out in one of the community settings. And I point out the university community relationship. You see the University of Maryland students to the table to the left of me. They are also there working with us to make sure we can respond to some of the awareness needs within the community. Next chart, please. This is how to contact us. This is how to send us money to help Alma and us with the rental assistance. Post Office Box 250, Upper Marlboro 20773. Next chart, please. And that concludes that. And now a quick video.
Also, I learned that we're going to need multiple streams of revenue or income in order to support the project. And yet, I'm learning that some people are willing to pay a registration fee.
Now, please join me in the tremendous honor of presenting Colonel Jimmy Slade with the Veterans in Transition Issues of Life Community Activist Award.
Good evening. I'm Jamil Slade, the Colonel of the United States Army retired, and I accept this award with honor and appreciation for Professor Cheryl Holt, Project Manager Leonora Okawara, and also the members of the School of Public Health at the University of Maryland, and the many churches in Prince George's County that have agreed to partner with us over the years. Since 2010, I would estimate that we have partnered with about 18 churches in Municipal Awareness Church Training. And that would conclude that. And I would say that overall, we've worked with at least 46 churches in just the health area since 2010. And also, Cheryl is now she's married. She's a full professor now, and she's also at the Greenbaum Cancer Center, where we are now working with her and implementing a cancer needs assessment of 10 counties in Maryland. Our deadline was to get that done by December 31st. 500 surveys. We have already completed all of the surveys except 8. And we're now looking into how to expand that to get a representative group that was not covered earlier. So that relationship is extended not only to College Park, but is now extended to the University of Maryland, Baltimore at the Greenbaum Comprehensive Cancer Center as well. Thank you, and back to you, Dr. Warren.
Colonel Slade, that was wonderful, wonderful presentation as well as a wonderful video. You know, you highlighted that there are many opportunities for collaboration, but there needs to be some groundwork. And early in your presentation, you talked about setting those priorities. You even spoke specifically about drafting a memorandum of agreement in, I think you said 2006 or 2008, which has still it still stands to this test of time.
Yes.
So we know that populations historically are marginalized, but how can we engage, recruit, and retain active participation in the research studies that you specifically talked about as it pertains to cancer, but also even with the housing projects that Reverend Savoy is overseeing?
Well, we find that by maintaining that integrity with the churches, I'm going to use, and I think I'm going to use, as a pastor out there right now, First Baptist, I'm going to leave off the rest that work with us in Impact. We now are working with that same pastor with Heal 2.0 as well. So when we work with the church, we find that the work that we started back in 2010 in Prince George's County has gotten around through the circuit of pastors. And so it's much easier for us to approach a church and ask for participation now than it was at that time. And also we believe that housing is what we want to do as well. I want to say to all the pastors out there that we need you to take a more active role in providing direct assistance to people. And I would even say, as I would like to say to them, we need more churches to buy up property and provide affordable housing, as St. Paul Church in Capitol Heights is doing, and as Ebenezer and many others are doing as well. And even if you're a small church, there are many things that you can do to reach out to meet the needs of community members more directly.
Thank you. So we also have Reverend Hickman, who's in on the conversation, and she sent me a message, and I asked if she would so kindly join us because she's also founder and executive director of Sisters Together and Reaching. So Reverend Hickman, can you share this your sentiments with the entire group?
Yes, first and foremost, thank you very much, Dr. Gaskins, once again for your work and for your assembling of all of us together today, and to my daughter, Dr. Warren, for facilitating this session dear to my heart. And I have to say hats off to Reverend Savoy as well, Colonel Slade. My sentiments that I expressed, I think that Colonel Slade has heard them before, but I don't believe that Reverend Savoy has. And at the hour that we are in relative to COVID and the number of jobs that have been lost, the number of businesses that have been closing down daily here in our state, as well as probably across the whole United States, and the price gouging that is taking place, lends itself far more to what I believe that our congregations can handle at this moment in terms of being benefactors of giving out these dollars, because offerings in the congregations, no matter what your congregation, your affiliation is, have been going down. They are not going up because people are struggling on every end. I would think at this hour that we really need to approach the governor in our state and across the United States to come up with an economic plan that is going to offer amnesty across the country, because nobody will be able to go back and do back pay, not even with the dollars, the funds that they have sent. Persons have been in such dire need, have waited such long times to even get unemployment checks and even Social Security checks and the like. So now is a time where we need to advocate in a different way. We need to get economists on our side. We need to have legal representation. We need for institutions such as Johns Hopkins and the like to come forth. This is not $1.5 million worth of dollars we're asking for. We're asking for trillions of dollars, because based on what Huffington Post put out sometime back in July, that by the end of December, there will be more than 40 million persons that are made homeless, not just the renters, but also those that own homes, who are finding themselves now not needed on their jobs. You have IT people that are being laid off, where everybody thought IT is the way to go and this is what we need. But the reality is that we are totally in a brand new world, needing a new beginning. And I call for amnesty, not just for homeowners and renters, as well as those that are the rentees and the like. But I think that at this point, all of America is going to need to have amnesty, and we start fresh. But we need a plan of how starting fresh helps everybody, helps the businesses regenerate and get back out there, being able to hire more people and the like, but keeping people in their homes. Once you make them homeless, our crime rate will be like we have never seen it before. Our murder rate, all of these things, our children will be so severely impacted. So this is a call, and a call that I'm glad that Colonel Slade, as well as Reverend Savoy, have brought to our full attention. This is not something to be researched. These are actual facts that we must address beyond even the racial issues and the racial tensions that are taking place. This is an hour where we need to stand up and say we can suffer no more. I mean, it's just like we're talking about senior citizens that will be left out altogether. We're already being left out, but now even more so now, that where will they go? How will they survive? How can you pay back rent? How can you pay forward rent with no job? And in terms of the food systems are deplorable because we have not orchestrated ourselves in a manner by which we can make sure everybody that needs food and needs the access is getting it. Because when you keep posting the flyers and things of that nature and telling people where to go, the people are hoarding food. And they're hoarding food because they're in fear of what's going to be tomorrow, that I won't have $50 to go to the store and get essentials. So I'm going to stop there because I could go on forever and then I would be into the preachment, and I don't want to do that.
Well, thank you, Reverend Hickman, for preaching to us. I will turn it back over to either Reverend Savoy or Colonel Slade to just to respond to your remarks. And I do want to say that as they prepare to chime in, that the chat is definitely jumping. Everyone's excited about both of our panelists, what they had to share and offer on today. And once Reverend Savoy and Colonel Slade offer their remarks, I'm going to bring Dr. Jones in from the University of Maryland to also share some comments.
I would just like to say, and I thank you, Dr. Reverend Hickman, and I just agree so much with what you said. And I was going to say, I don't see where, well, a person is not going to be able to pay the kind of rent that has accumulated and maintain themselves. And so I definitely agree that, and even when you look at dollars it has to be going to the community organizations and not, the typically the kind of things that happen where it goes to banks and it doesn't get equitably distributed where it needs to be. It needs to go, if there are dollars disseminated, it needs to go to the community organizations that's actually working with persons that need the help so that it actually gets to them. I don't know what figure, I think someone had asked, it's going to take billions of dollars if you look at it that way, which I just don't see how it can be done. So the idea of the amnesty, I think might be something that you researchers really need to look into. What can we do? And it's going to get worse. We know it's going to get worse. People cannot pay their rent. And I mean, when we think about the children that's involved in this, children that, losing their home and being on the street and homeless. So it's just a really a frightening thought that when we think about what this has caused, and it really caused to get greater. So we really need help in terms of figuring out how we can deal with this crisis, this public health crisis.
I would only add to that, you recognize it's a huge problem, but we're the same nation that did the European or the Marshall Plan. If we can save Europe, we could certainly save ourselves if we really put a real effort in doing it. Short term, to make the situation even worse, the payroll tax, as I finally now understand it, it simply means you don't have to deduct for Social Security this year, but come January, you have to pay double. You have to pay the Social Security that you didn't pay this year and the Social Security that's due in the first quarter of next year. So as Reverend Hickman stated, with all the huge problems that we have, if you don't have a job, but if you're one of the people that do have a job and you're in this situation, your situation is going to become potentially worse as well. So I think it requires, Hopkins wrote the paper on COVID-19. I think Hopkins and others need to write papers about the housing and economic situation, which goes back to Dr. Beal this morning, Dr. Ann, who said the first thing in Black power is economic power. So, so that is where we need to look, because we are losing huge amounts of economic power as we deal with this COVID-19 situation, as well as health issues as well.
Thanks, Mrs. Slade. Dr. Jones at the University of Maryland.
Yes, hi, thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah,
Great.
I can hear you.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for all of the presentations. I'm so glad to be here to the family reunion today. So I did a little mini dissertation in the chat box, and I thought Dr. Warren was going to read it, but I guess I'll highlight it. I love both of your presentations, Reverend Savoy, and happy to see you again, Jimmy. You asked a question earlier, Dr. Warren, about, what are some things that we can do for the community? And when you asked that question, I was like taking a deep breath, like, oh my goodness, how to answer this, because there's so much need that's out there. But I appreciated, the comment that Reverend Savoy had mentioned about, the structural issue about affordable housing and how it's really going to take a multi-pronged approach, certainly the immediate needs, the food, the utilities, but at the level of getting to the root of the problem and having, been homeless myself growing up and understanding the challenges of, not having a stable place, that's a start there. And in order for anything to really kind of build, you really need some stability. And so I was thinking, as a university, we're really in a privileged position. And what we can do is certainly amplify our voice about the urgency of the problem. And as Jimmy mentioned, you guys being in the trenches, you and Reverend Savoy, you don't often have the time to collect the data, to make those evaluation and metrics that everybody asks for in order to really show that that's significant. But that's what we can do. And we as researchers have the tools to do that we do every day. And then really navigating through our networks. So I recognize, as I'm going through the university, there are persons who are now in my space that have, more power, that can know somebody else. So I believe, as a person of faith, that God has strategically placed persons in positions. And as that is in place, we have to start to think about, well, who are those persons that we need to connect with and really allow ourselves to, as I was reading this morning, really be strong and courageous and not afraid or discouraged to move forward and face these challenges. And the last place I'll mention on the third part was about, so there's a lot of universities in Maryland, and I grew up in Hopkins, but now here I'm at the University of Maryland. But unfortunately, in a lot of ways, we are often in our silos, sadly. And because of that, there's a lot of things that I feel if we can just pull together and partner together, this could magnify our efforts. So I might be looking at a piece over here that could fit with a piece over there. But we all, as the video pointed out that you showed before, Dr. Warren, there are so many things and forces that keep us in our silos that is really bad. But the last thing I'll say is, the time is now. And I think that we have a lot of privilege and opportunity to do partnerships in a way that really stretches us in ways that we haven't before. So I'm gonna get off my soapbox and go on mute.
No, I think that was a great soapbox, and we didn't pay you to say that. But one of the conversations that's been happening behind the scenes as we prepared for this session was exactly that. How does our research partners use their, and I'm going to use your words, privilege and position to assist communities in really getting solutions, because we are the center of solutions. So reaching solutions to the community concerns. And I appreciate you speaking up, because oftentimes community members feel left out of those discussions and really feel left probably with the short end of the stick. I will share that we had another panelist lined up that was going to speak specifically about the psychosocial challenges that we've been seeing within the youth population. We've been talking about housing and cancer and the adult population, but our youth, we're forgetting about them in a lot of these conversations, and they have feelings, they have emotions, and they're experiencing COVID-19 the same way we are. And this executive director over a youth organization in Baltimore City decided to decline the invitation to participate as a panelist because um, uh, they felt that we constantly have these brainstorming conversations and these symposium to talk about the challenges that we're seeing, and there's no movement to these grassroots root efforts. There's no real money. There's no real technical support. There's no long-term solutions or long-term benefits. And so, Dr. Jones, I appreciate you speaking, specifically to that. And, we're always talking about how we can recruit, retain, and engage community members. But my question to our academic scholars is, how can we recruit, retain, and engage our scholars for the long-term commitment in addressing these challenges and issues? So we digest and meditate on that. And if anyone feels feels up to the challenge to answer or offer any additional insight, there goes Dr. Gaskin, or offer any insight to that, chime in. We're family. It's the barbecue. Did you say it's the barbecue, Dr. Jones? It's a family reunion.
Yeah. I called it the family reunion because I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces, and it's so good that we're here because this is the group, guys. I mean, you are the most candid, forthright people that I know. And so I felt that, what, if there's a solution to be had, it's going to come out of this group. So I canceled all my afternoon meetings because I was going to make it in here to hear. And I hear Darren Gaskell, put yourself off mute. So I know you got an answer right there. Go right ahead.
Well, first of all, let me say this panel, I really appreciate the conversation that you've had with us about the efforts in which you're doing on the ground to try to help communities, and also in terms of just pointing us to what are the pressing issues. One of my sort of sayings to myself is that there's no solution for us without us. And it's just so the reminder to me that if I'm going to do some work in my own community, I can't come flying in like I'm Superman with all these answers that I've gotten from the ivory tower, that I really need to go and talk to the folks who are on the ground, who are dealing with it, and really understand and appreciate their lived experience and the constraints in which they're under, the strengths in which they have, the issues, the thing that they think is the problem, help them, because they have to help me define the problem, and then think about what the solution is. Dr. Warren, I am so sorry that your third panelist declined our invitation, because I will tell you a story. One of the best hours that I spent as an academic over the last 3 or 4 years was at a Bloomberg American Health Initiative Summit, in which I sat in a room with some young people from Baltimore City who started telling us about the challenges that they face. And I say it was the best hour that I had spent because I was, in a real sense, hearing their perceptions about what the difficulties and challenges that they face. And the thing that impressed me the most is that their understanding that while we can see the results of their pain, and while we can complain about how they react to their pain, that their perception is that we don't want to understand anything about their pain. We don't want to hear about their pain. We just want them to essentially behave in spite of their pain. and that we're not really listening to them. And so it leads me to this. I'm really frustrated in the position in which I am in, because I feel like we're the fire department and we've come to the fire after the house is burnt down. And so we come with all of our resources, but by the time we get there and at the time in which we're trying to intervene, it's already the major damage has already been done. And so I'm trying to think about how we can really go upstream. And one of the things in which I really think that we as a community have to think about is how we can impact the lives of children and their families in a real meaningful way. Because one thing that I am convinced of, I meet a lot of very brilliant, talented people. And when brilliant and talented people are well educated, well nurtured, well trained, you can't stop them from doing what it is that they want to do. But if they've been handicapped along with food insecurity, housing insecurity, they haven't been exposed to good teachers and good educators, and then by the time I come along and say, hey, I'm looking for someone to enter into a STEM field, and I'm asking somebody who is 18 to 21 and they're really bright, but they have all of these kinds of deficits and struggles that they've associated with and interaction with our criminal justice system, then it's by the time I come along with my program, I'm too late. I should have been there when they were 5-year-old. I should have been there when they were 6, or when they were 4, or when they were 8. I should have been advocating for them then, building for them then. By the time they get to 18, 19, they've been whipped up on by society so much that by then I come with my program and smiling, that's too late. So I think there are a couple of things that we can do, and which is really, and in some ways, first thing I think, we need to seriously think about living wages. Because part of the thing is it just costs a lot to live in our cities. And we've allowed employers to just basically not pay people anything for their services. And so we should think about living wages. We should also think about, marijuana is a public health crisis. It is not a criminal justice issue. If you think that there are negative health effects of marijuana, do it like tobacco. Negative health effects of tobacco. But the way in which we see marijuana ends up being a gateway drug to the prison, to school to prison pipeline. That's all it is. And a lot of people get arrested for marijuana possession, and they have to then, for the rest of their lives, check that box. And it impacts their housing, their employment, their ability to get loans, their ability to really function in our society. And we sit and so we've allowed it to happen. And then the other thing in which I think we really need to do is as Dr. Ann was talking about her colleague who just has to fight for her children in school. We have to realize that the fight is there with the children in the school. Because if you take a 12-year-old who is able to read, able to do compute and understand some mathematics, you can't stop them. Because many of us know that if you got a 12-year-old and they want to put their mind to do something and they're able to do it, you can't control that teenager. As they believe that that's something they should do and they're able to do it, you can't control them to stop them do it. And the thing is that too many of our 12-year-olds get to 12 without the basic ability to think critically and to read and to write and to do math. And we allow something had to happen between kindergarten and sixth grade where those things just don't happen for our children the way they should. But if we make sure they happen, believe me, they'll do well. So that's you got. I'm gonna get off my soapbox, but because I'm a preacher and I've got a couple of sermons out
Always
of this
preachers.
interaction right now. So y'all helped me out for all October. I was wondering what I was going to preach about, and now I got some sermons for October to preach. Thank you, Reverend Savoy. I got a sermon on housing. Brother Jimmy, I got a sermon on community health, and Reverend Hickman, I got a sermon, and so I got myself 3 sermons in October. Thank you so much.
It's funny because right now I have it on gallery view and all the reverends are lined up right under each other. Reverend Hickman, Reverend Gaskin, and then Reverend Michelle Spencer. That's a side joke. So thank you so much, Reverend Gaskin. Thank you so much, Dr. Gaskin, for those remarks.
I answered to both.
Right, I know you do. Please definitely join me in thanking both Reverend Savoy and Colonel Slade in their presentations, but also in the thoughtful discussion. They both brought up some important things. I do want to highlight, I think at the basis of both our community and academic partnerships, there has to be a sense of integrity and trust. And I think all parties at the table, all stakeholders, everyone who's trying to move forward in the solutions and making sustainable changes that last over time and building health equity will agree that we all have agendas and that those agendas should not be hidden, but we should be working to figure out where there's a balance between all of those agendas and we're not operating in the silos. So I will close on this, and that's a video from our VCU, some scholars down at VCU, and they speak specifically once again to this partnership. So thank you all. And again, thank you, Reverend Savoy and Jimmy Slade.
Find that working with communities makes me better at what I do.
Always try to speak to people with a smile. Smile goes a long way. Best practices for the university may not be best practices for that community.
The more engagement you have, the better. I think for every study, you need to figure out not whether community engaged research is the right approach, but how much do I want to engage the community with my research?
I actually believe that all types of research can benefit from community engagement.
More important is the fact that community engaged research produces better knowledge.
I find that working with communities makes me better at what I do. I learn so much when I work with communities. I feel like my academic knowledge or the data that I have about that issue, illness, is so much more informed and contextual when I work directly with communities. Working closely with a community partner gives you that insight. It brings a additional level of expertise to the team when you have that on the ground knowledge?
You can be more sure when you have a close partnership going on around research that the research is going to be beneficial, not just to the researcher, but to a broader audience.
It does bestow upon you a level of trust that you won't have if you don't have a strong and a positive and a genuine relationship with a community partner.
Because it's really based on experiences and knowledge and what our residents know about their community.
That people could tell you, it's never gonna work, or that's a really great idea, or do this. So I think there's multiple benefits.
Because they were able to understand the interview data we were looking at in ways that we couldn't even conceive of because of the experiences they had.
It's an opportunity to get real information, not just someone's opinion.
You don't have the access in the community, you don't have the resources, you don't have the know-how. Your community partner can open multiple doors for you within the community.
Benefit of being a part of this team as it allowed me to gain new skills and opportunities within my community. You're learning new things. It's not something that you always know. You don't always go into a situation thinking that you know everything. And sometimes you have those moments where it's like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that this is why this happened. I didn't know that people really thought this way.
And educational opportunities that they would have never had the opportunity to get before.
So people start thinking about different things that they hadn't thought about before. So they may not have thought about wanting green spaces, but now all of a sudden they want green spaces.
I just didn't have the capacity to do that. And I knew that VCU did.
The university and we, the community of Richmond, should be engaging in more community engaged research models, because I think it truly has the potential to affect change in ways that have benefits at so many different levels.
The community member has the ability to speak the lingo that the community needs to hear in order to get that conversation started when they're doing research, that researcher, that academic may not know.
So we do engage VCU to conduct that evaluation for us, and we use that information to determine what our program should look like.
So just the research itself that we've done with Engaging Richmond Team, learning the history of the community, learning how the community thinks and perceives their community, helps me make better decisions when I'm moving forward and planning different events or making decisions about what I would like to see done within our community.
It has been a win-win-win situation for the project, and I believe for VCU as well.
Thank you again. That's all for today, folks. I do want to be sure to acknowledge that if you would like to get in contact with the Community Engagement Dissemination Corps, do not hesitate to reach out to Dr. Janice Bowie, Colonel Jimmy Slade, or myself. We are the co-leads for the CDEC, and we're excited about serving in that capacity. And we are so appreciative of participating in today's conversation of moving from scholarship, practice, and policy into impact. Thank you.
And we will get going. It's 3:15, so good afternoon, everyone. We are staying on time today. Thank you for coming back after the break. Again, my name is Keisha Pollock-Porter. I co-direct the Investigator Development Corps. And back when this symposium was going to be in person, we were going to have poster sessions, and we were really excited to give researchers throughout the university an opportunity, and students, throughout the university an opportunity to present their work. And when this moved to a virtual space, we reached out to them and asked how they wanted to share their work, if they still wanted to, and Many were eager, the ones who are still here, and we talked about doing these enlightening talks. So a lightning talk is a very abbreviated session, 5 minutes long. And I'm thrilled today to welcome 2 colleagues who are going to facilitate and moderate the session, including doing the brief intros and ensuring that each of our presenters stay on time. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, Dr. Danetta Sloan, and sorry, let me make sure I see folks on my computer. Are you there, Danetta?
I'm here. Yes, I am.
Thank you so much. And Ms. Michelle Spencer. They are both faculty at the school and are core faculty members with the center. And I'm thrilled to have worked with them on the subcommittee to put together today's session. So I will turn it over to Danetta and Michelle. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Keisha. And thank you so much, everyone, for hanging in there with us this afternoon. The first person that will present is Dr. Nina Martin. Dr. Martin left her lab to pursue her passion for science communication research and practice. She specifically co-creates science engagement tools and research with youth and their adult advocates in under-resourced communities. Dr. Martin is also the executive director of Public Health United, a grassroots science communications nonprofit organization. So let's greet Dr. Martin. Thank you.
Set my timer.
We'll watch your time, don't worry.
Great. Thank you so much for this opportunity to present our work in West Baltimore called Public Engagement Practices for Scientists. We will cover the issue of science equity and a specific barrier to success, poor science engagement and its evaluation, our solution, and a demo of our prototype app. So as she said, I left the lab after 15 years of biomedical research because of my science outreach work in Southwest Baltimore with youth. And I found them to be so smart and funny, inquisitive, loving, but I saw them drop out of high school, get into fights, live in abandoned housing, have suicidal thoughts. I developed relationships that changed my perspective, my career path, and me. We talked about how Hopkins spends tons to save lives, but they felt like the data wasn't there to help them. They couldn't access it. They didn't know how to use it. I changed my research to improving the ability of these now colleagues, friends, and actually family to participate and use science to help their community. How do we improve science participation, diversity, transparency, and usability? Ultimately, how do we improve science equity? As we know from health equity practice, overcoming barriers does not have a one-size-fits-all solution. We all have to adapt to each setting. Because I have a unique expertise in science communication, we are tackling science equity by creating new solutions to improve science engagement evaluation. Basically, how do we know if what we are doing to engage is working? Why do we need new solutions? Why are we not all doing amazing frequent science engagement evaluation already? I don't know how. It's challenging. There's time, cost, no budget, no incentives, no defined community to get help, fear, bad past experiences. Our team is tackling these issues head on. We are a passionate co-op of youth, policymakers, scientists, behavior therapists, and community leaders. Together, we are working on solutions to open up science by adding engagement and its evaluation throughout the scientific method. To do this, we are co-creating an app, and we're gonna just see this in action very quickly. Share screen. Go. Okay, welcome to the PEPS app. That's me and my bow tie. So you can use the PEPS app to plan inclusive and usable science with the end users of research. That's anyone who wants to use data and do something with it. Other scientists, public health professionals, probably everyone here in this meeting. Next, you can set up team science evaluation. we include assessment of both the end users and the scientists to make sure we all have the skills, resources, and confidence we need to succeed. And then we can also track and export data ready to share graphics, saving you time and confusion about what to report and how. So here's the main screen, but because we have 5 minutes, I'm just going to show you 2 features of the app that will solve the top barriers to success. So first, addressing the I don't know how. So over the past 2 years, we've developed out in Southwest Baltimore, the PEPS framework or the PEPS method for co-planning, implementing, and evaluating engagement. The key to success is that all relevant team members, including the end users and scientists, are involved in every step, and every team member participates in the evaluation. We don't have time to flesh out this framework, and I don't want to throw too many new ideas out there, but I want to show you that we have a working system to adapt to your needs. For example, some users may have lower literacy levels, so we can rely heavily on visuals, icons, and voice entry. The other major barriers to success that we are tackling are incentivization and creating a community of science engagement. So based on popular points programs like Uber, Starbucks that I use, we are gamifying the process of engagement to make it fun, build a community so that new teams to engagement can look at our gold members' teams and understand how to be successful. We also want to create pipelines for youth to internships and jobs. Thanks to the Urban Health Institute, we developed a media and advocacy training for youth from under-resourced settings so that they can advocate for themselves. This rewards program will create a sustainable pipeline for these youth from our training program to internships and jobs. So there's a lot of depth that we didn't go into that this app can do, and we want to work with you. And we're eager to include you in the design process. So again, thank you so much for this opportunity to present this work to improve science equity and generating engagement solutions that work in all kinds of settings. And we hope you will join us to make science more transparent, diverse, inclusive, and usable for all. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. And it sounds like your app is promising, and I would like to hear more about it at a different time. So hopefully we get an opportunity to do that. Thank you so much. Next, we have Kevin Janaris. He's a recent graduate of Johns Hopkins University and is a research assistant under Dr. Tangela Purnell. Let's welcome Kevin.
Hi, I will be presenting on patient perspectives about strategies to enhance transplant educational materials and access to kidney transplant. So this study was done by the authors listed and with the support of the grant awarded to Dr. Tangela Purnell at the ERGOT group. We can go to the next slide. The study was really driven by 2 pertinent facts. Number 1, there are racial and economic disparities in kidney transplantation. Currently, African-American patients are more in need of kidney transplants, but are less likely to receive them. It has been shown in papers at Johns Hopkins and at the Northwestern Medical Center. The same is true for patients in lower economic situations. The next driving fact is that much of what we know about kidney education is focused on patients undergoing dialysis and not on patients undergoing the transplant process. There is a need for more work on educational materials for kidney transplant. What we found is that of patients that make it to the screening process, only a small percent end up fully pursuing a transplant. So we're getting them to the door, but patients are not finishing the process. So right now we're faced with the 2 issues of disparities and low completion rates of the transplant screening process. So we sought out to improve the patient educational materials. We've been talking a lot about solutions today. So this project was really focused on a solution to the issue at hand. So our goal was to improve patient education for kidney transplant by engaging patients in our own health system at Johns Hopkins and designing strategies based off of this input. This study utilized qualitative interviews with 30 patients. I'm sorry, next slide. With 30 patients who were evaluated for and received a kidney transplant at Johns Hopkins. The majority of the patients were over 50, African American, and had an educational attainment of less than a college degree. These interviews were recorded, and then 2 investigators conducted thematic analysis of the transcripts. A code book consisting of themes and codes was created inductively using a constant comparative method of analysis and a grounded theory approach. These approaches were used because, these approaches were used because of the nature of the data and the questions we were trying to answer. When we're looking to answer a question about educational materials, we really wanted to have the data and the information the patients were giving have that guide us to an answer rather than forming our own opinions. So because Hopkins is an international transplant center, this data was tailored to the patient base around the hospital. We used a zip code radius around the medical center to capture patients that were most likely to experience the barriers and those who lived around Baltimore and the surrounding areas. Go to the next slide. So through this, 3 major themes arose. Number 1, patients expressed a barrier to understanding the material. They cited things like excessive medical jargon and complex diction. These are issues that have been issues for a long time in the medical community and have been something that we need to keep in mind. Secondly, they cited the desire for more formats for the material, ranging from webinars to phone hotlines. These different formats would help patients with different learning strands comprehend the material and really grasp the core concepts. And then finally, they found the material lacking in its coverage of crucial personal concerns, such as what happens after transplant and how long the transplant is supposed to last. Patients are very worried about these sorts of things, and they felt that the transplant material they were given was not really answering a lot of the questions they had. So as you can see by the representative quotes, just to read one to get some of their voice, they said brochures and booklets are good because they do have some form of reference if you need to find specific things. Also, having a kidney transplant person you can call and find out what is going on. I found that very helpful. I guess they call them kidney coordinators, or transplant coordinators. So this just shows what people were saying to us and how we could take this into account. So on the next slide. So this study found that there were needs in the transplant system that are not being met. We are tasked with asking, how do we make the system work for the patients? The first thing we can do to improve the educational system for transplant at Hopkins is to listen. We would expect this not to be too much of a controversial idea since patients are telling us what they want. We should be able to make solutions based off of their input rather than top-down thinking. So patients ask for educational materials to be at the appropriate reading level for the patient and to be understandable. Patients have expressed a desire for more information about expectations after transplant and concerns for post-transplant life. The transplant center could provide alternate formats of our materials and help patients best grasp the core concepts, accommodating patients with learning strengths in different areas rather than just written material. Finally, these findings are not just for Johns Hopkins. They should be applicable to other transplant hospitals. They should be implemented in transplant centers across the country in order to really close the disparities in transplant and improve the transplant process. So I thank you all for listening, and I appreciate the event you put on today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. That was a great presentation, such important work that you're doing. And you kept to time. I think we're doing really well. Thank you so much. Next, we have Grisha Vargas. Grisha is a third-year doctoral student in the Department of Health Policy and Management. Her primary research interests are on examining and addressing racial and ethnic health disparities within the areas of kidney disease, donation, and transplantation. Let's welcome Grisha.
Well, what do we do? We learned the
apologies for that. Good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Grecia, and I'm here today to present on additional findings from the same project that Kevin just finished discussing. So my presentation is titled Strategies to Mitigate Disparities and Improve Social Support Among Johns Hopkins Kidney Transplant Candidates who are undergoing the transplant evaluation process. And just for disclosure, this work was made possible through an AHRQ grant led by Dr. Tangela Purnell. Next slide, please. Well, as you all just heard, disparities in kidney transplantation are vast. For example, we know that the majority of patients who begin the kidney transplant process are not ultimately able to complete it due to myriad factors. And so we know that inadequate education just makes up one major factor that these patients face. And another key barrier that exists is surrounding the lack of social support to folks who are undergoing the process, especially among racial and ethnic minorities and those who are from low-income communities. So therefore, the goal of this work that I'm presenting aim to explore and identify how social support plays a role in influencing the experiences among patients who are undergoing the evaluation for a kidney transplant at Johns Hopkins Hospital. Next slide, please. Again, so some of this information on this slide, it's similar to what we've heard from Kevin's presentation, but I think it's still important to just quickly reiterate. So this was a qualitative exploratory study that conducted semi-structured in-depth interviews and focus groups with a total of 30 participants, and all of whom were either at the time undergoing the evaluation process or actively waiting for their transplant. So once the qualitative data was collected, the audio was transcribed verbatim and underwent thematic analysis by 2 of our independent coders from our team. So just some quick general demographic information showed that the majority of our sample was African American or Black, were greater than 50 years old and married. The next slide, please. Going to the key themes and participant quotes or our results, the inductive analysis revealed that there were 3 subsets or types of support that participants discussed, specifically support within the realms of psychosocial, financial, and medical decision-making. Within the theme of psychosocial support that emerged across the interviews, participants expressed in needing more of it throughout the various stages of the process. And for example, having a type of peer-to-peer support network system that they could tap into. For example, as one of our participants expressed during the interview, they could come up with a network of people who received kidney transplants and who are willing to contact somebody who's being evaluated, just for those people who are looking for support. Another form of support arising from the data pertain to financial support. For example, patients expressing concerns over the cost of medications that are involved post-transplantation and being able to maintain their kidney in the long term. And finally, the medical decisional support theme included items such as participants expressing needing help with comprehending the various and at times overwhelming medical paperwork that Kevin mentioned, and with being able to meet the various milestones and appointments that are involved throughout the process. So for example, another quote, one participant stated in regards to navigating the evaluation process and trying to complete it within a tight timeline. It put a lot of unnecessary pressure because I didn't move further in the process. I still don't have a kidney and I feel pressured myself. I feel like I pressured myself. Get it done, get it done, get it done. And filled it into this small gap that there was probably no need for. So next slide. So this is the final slide. So shifting gears over to the implications from our study findings. So results indicated that participants expressed wanting improvements such as peer-to-peer network, 24-hour nurse hotline that they could reach out to get any questions or concerns answered throughout the process, including post-transplantation, and as well as having a patient navigator that can help them go through the various expectations in the evaluation process with all the appointments and yeah. So interestingly enough, patients expressed that they wanted social support that comes from outside the health or medical system. So for example, from faith-based or community-based organizations. So that was a interesting finding, I thought. And so just to quickly conclude, we hope that these findings can help contribute to developing like actionable solutions and strategies and to help address disparities within the kidney transplantation and improve the types of support patients receive throughout the process here at Johns Hopkins. So this concludes the end of my lightning talk. I hope I didn't go over time or talk too quickly, but thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Gracia. The work that you and Kevin are doing is very important, and I hope you continue to do it. It's really needed. So at this time, I'm going to turn over the talking to Michelle, and I'm going to keep time for a little bit.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Donata. I appreciate it. And again, good afternoon to all of you. And thank you to Dr. Gaskins and to you, Dr. Pollock Porter, for this incredible convening. As Donata mentioned, Dr. Sloan mentioned, the first initial lightning talks gave us a great overview of their work in terms of improving science equity and improving kidney transplant, and certainly mitigating disparities in kidney transplant through social supports. And that's incredible. And as Dr. Sloan mentioned, the work is needed. And so I appreciate hearing and learning about that. We have a few more presentations and lightning talks this afternoon. So a policy researcher from Harvard Medical School, Jessup Young, is an anti-son public service fellow in government. Jessup graduated from Johns Hopkins University with the Julius Turner Award for Best Thesis in Public and Political Science. And we look forward to your presentation, Jessup, as you talk about human rights advocacy and humanitarian aid in North Korea. And so I'll turn it over to you. As Dr. Sloan mentioned, she will be keeping time. So just check your chat for your 1-minute notification. So over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Michelle Spencer, for the wonderful introduction. My name is Jessup Jong. I am a policy researcher, and this is 5 minutes, and it won't be enough time to look into the details or the data, but I will go over the main ideas. And if you're interested further, you can look for this title on Amazon or my name, and you'll be able to buy the book version as well as the ebook. Human suffering in North Korea. And the focus here is about humans. What are the political determinants of health, right? Why do people fight is the main issue and problem that I'm looking at. In this case, the case study is North Korea. But I think with COVID-19, you can see that politicization of health really impacts people. People die as a result. And human suffering in North Korea is one example of that. So please go to the next slide. And so there are two communities that I examined that have a large divide. Humanitarian aid is providing medicine, right? Alleviating immediate suffering, like food, giving out food, better water quality, things like that. So common forms of are things like that. One thing that is interesting is it starts with human, because humanitarian aid is trying to care for the human beings in the country. Next slide, please. And then we have human rights. And human rights also has human in it because it is the rights that people should have, human rights. So rights that are inherent. And these tend to be a little bit more political. So negative rights such as right to liberty, life, movement, things like that. And so the details are very complicated, but what is interesting is the two have commonalities of human, but these two communities fight. So why do they fight? I look at why do these two communities fight, how do they fight, and what can be done about it. So next slide, please. This is an example of how people fight. This is my current boss at Harvard, and my former boss at Human Rights. And these two people are fighting over statistics. And you probably see this right now about COVID-19, right? The last tweet is saying, your reasonable figure is not really reliable, and things like that. So, people fight, and the result is funding gets slashed. Both sides, human rights and humanitarian aid, which really just the people who are receiving this aid, they suffer as a result of politics. And legislation gets stalled, less awareness, etc. So next slide, please. These are some pretty statistics. You can look at them in the book. Next slide, please. So two different factors. People have different goals and different supporters. So they have ideological, professional goals, and supporters are different. So they're liberal slash, conservative divines. So next slide, please. These are the next slide again. These are the different goals and supporters. Next slide again. And so what can be done about this? We have to align interests so that the two communities can work together. And these are really just the very basic forms of how do you resolve conflict, right? If you're fighting with your parents or something like that, you have to align your interests, you have to communicate, you have to talk to people, and share resources so that, sharing is caring. So yes, for maybe 1 minute or so, if you have any questions, please let me know. But this is about why do people fight over health.
So Jessup, thank you for that. I will note that the important question that you raise is who suffers when people fight, and certainly it's the people that are most in need of the help and the support. And to your point about humanitarian aid and human rights, and so I think you've raised a brilliant point, and we look forward to learning and reading more. As you so noted, we can go to Amazon for the publication. I would also encourage our guests to follow you on Twitter. Your Twitter handle, I'm not certain of what your Twitter handle is, but you have been certainly very active on Twitter in raising the issue and ensuring that individuals are aware of what is happening in North Korea. So thank you for your work. Our next speaker, Dr. Elam Hatif, is a preventive medicine physician. She's an assistant scientist at the Center for Population Health IT and academic director of the General Preventive Medicine Residency Program. And we look forward to hearing from you as you're talking about addressing the impacts of neighborhood characteristics on healthcare utilization. So I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Hatif.
Thanks, and thanks for the opportunity. I'm going to talk about the work that I do at my center, making use of the available data in the healthcare system and non-medical data to address health disparities from at the healthcare system level. Next. We all know a lot about the impact that social determinants of health have on health and health outcomes, and the fact that they have a higher impact on health outcomes than any medical or clinical interventions that happen in the healthcare system. Next. So making use of the data that is available in the healthcare system on a patient level, getting collected on an everyday basis, and linking it to the population level data that is getting collected outside healthcare system, it makes it possible to assess the impact of these social determinants and to address the health disparities in the healthcare system. Next. So what we did here, we used the data at Johns Hopkins Healthcare to assess the impact of the social determinants and place-based factors on the utilization of healthcare services. Next. We had access to the claims or billing data from Johns Hopkins Healthcare from 2016 and 17 on about 200,000 patients that had at least 6 months of enrollment in one of the plans, the insurance plans that Hopkins provides, either Priority Partners, which is a Medicaid plan, and also the Employer Health Plan. Next. We selected the patients that had an address available to link their data to the population level data that US Census collects using the data from American Community Survey. It's a survey that Census runs every year. We calculated area differential index, which is a composite measure of several different socioeconomic factors on a population level, and it helps to rank the neighborhoods across the country based on the socioeconomic characteristics that they have, and the higher rank shows more disadvantaged neighborhoods. Next. So just looking at the priority partner patients, the patients that are in neighborhoods at the 90th percentile of ADI or higher, the ones that are really in the disadvantaged neighborhoods. Next. They were more African Americans. They had a higher utilization of healthcare services, whether it was ED visit or inpatient admission or readmission or any avoidable ED. And they also had more comorbidities and they had more clinical conditions. Next. Next. Just going to the next slide. So just doing some modeling, looking at different factors that impacted the ED visit. Next. In the priority partner patients, in the Medicaid patients, we look at whether living in a neighborhood that was disadvantaged had any impact on the utilization of health services and compared those patients with the patients that were living in neighborhoods with less challenges. And this model basically shows that the patients that were in more advantaged neighborhoods, the ones with ADI of 10 percentile or lower, they had lower utilization of healthcare services comparing to the patients in the disadvantaged neighborhoods. These are all Medicaid patients, so they have all the same level of social challenges on a patient level, but the challenges that their neighborhoods bring to them puts them at a more vulnerable situation. Next. Next slide. We also mapped the ADI in Baltimore, and as you can see, East and West Baltimore had more disadvantaged neighborhoods. Next. And we looked at where the ED visits were coming from. Next. And most of the ED visits in Baltimore to Hopkins came from a few of those block groups in East Baltimore. Next. So this was basically an example of how healthcare systems can use the data collected in them to identify vulnerable patients in the community and to develop some interventions that address the needs of those patients. Next. And with such an approach, the healthcare system can have a kind of more systematic way of identifying vulnerable populations and designing patient population level interventions. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Hatif, thank you so much for your presentation. As you were going through your presentation, I was thinking about new legislation that is being put forward, and Dr. Gaskins is part of the thought leaders who are thinking about this health equity resource zones, looking specifically at high utilizers in communities across the state. And I think the work that you're doing is highlighting very much the work that's being done and the needs of researchers to think about and how to impact the healthcare system by providing literature and data to elected officials in terms of what fundings are needed to support community health. And so thank you for that. We will hear from Dr. Siobhan Holliday. Dr. Holliday is an assistant professor in the Department of Population, Family, and Reproductive Health. Her research focuses on racial and ethnic disparities related to violence against women. Dr. Holliday, we welcome you to talk on the spatial examination of racial ethnic differences and unintended pregnancies among postpartum women. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to share with you briefly some of the preliminary findings from AIM 1 of my pilot award. So before I jump in, I gratefully acknowledge my collaborators, Ann Corrigan from the Spatial Science Center at Hopkins, our very own Dr. Roland Thorpe, as well as Dr. Margaret Chow from the LA County Health Department. Dr. Chow is the principal investigator of the data set that I'll share with you, that includes the research that I'll share with you today. And I am also grateful for funding through the U54, which made this work possible, as well as additional research funding from NIMHD. Next slide, please. So the current annual estimate of unintended pregnancy is 45% among women in the United States. And despite recent decreases in annual incidence of unintended pregnancy, there are still very stark disparities with Black women more likely to experience unintended pregnancy than their white and Latina counterparts. And unintended pregnancy is associated with significant public health concerns for the mothers as well as for their children. We know from previous research that experiencing intimate partner violence and reproductive coercion, which is a sexual form of intimate partner violence and an area that I focus on, increases women's risk of unintended pregnancy by twofold. And in a study that I completed, we found that reproductive coercion was a significant driver of unintended pregnancy among Black women only relative to white women. And so there's really a need to contextualize risk of unintended pregnancy. And the purpose of my pilot award was to understand neighborhood, or to identify potential neighborhood level drivers. And so the pilot project was two part, and I'll share with you briefly some of the preliminary findings from the first aim. Next slide, please. So we analyzed the 2016 cohort of postpartum mothers from the Los Angeles Mommy and Baby Study, which is a population-based surveillance. Within this sample are 5,474 mothers and data corresponding to their pre, peri, and postnatal experiences. We integrated census tract level data using the American Community Survey and conducted exploratory modeling and other descriptive analyses across levels of the socioecological model, as well as completed some stratified cluster detection and regression modeling, which I'll show you on the next slides. So here you see the results from our cluster detection analysis. And so just to quickly orient you here, the points on the map are women, and the green points are unintended pregnancies in this cohort, and the blue points are intended pregnancies. And the circles represent the clusters where relative risks of unintended pregnancy are significantly greater than other regions in LA County. And the red circle at the lower region of the map represents both of the red circles rather, represent all of the mothers in LA County, but I'll focus quickly on the Black mothers and the white mothers. And so the small black circle in the downtown Southeast LA area, that is a cluster of Black mothers. So it's comprised of both unintended and intended pregnancies, but the significance here is that we found unintended pregnancy to be 66% higher in this cluster relative to other Black moms in LA County. And similarly, in the northern region of LA County, in the yellow circle, we have a cluster, much larger cluster of white moms whose risk was nearly twice as high in this region. Next slide, please. So here is the preliminary results from our multivariate model. So I realize this isn't the most optimal presentation for this type of talk, but I'll just highlight two major points, and that's the interpersonal and neighborhood levels. And so we found that reproductive coercion among Hispanic women increased odds of unintended pregnancy by 2.3 times. And social deprivation was statistically significant among Hispanic women as well. However, we didn't identify any clustering among Hispanic or Asian mothers. Next slide, please. I think I have bars around all of these. If you can just click through to the next. Sorry about that. Thank you. And so I'll just wrap up by saying this is the first study to our knowledge to really try to explore neighborhood level features of unintended pregnancy risk by race ethnicity. Based on the preliminary findings, there's still more work to do to really try to understand drivers of unintended pregnancy risk outside of violence, and whether or not neighborhood has an impact on unintended pregnancy risk or not. And this research fits into a broader research trajectory that I am working towards, which seeks to understand social and structural influences of violence against women and related health outcomes like unintended pregnancy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Holliday. I was thinking about your work and your presentation just earlier this week with the House of Ruth, and thinking about intimate partner violence and its impact on many factors, including unintended pregnancy. So thank you again for your research and for your work. At this time, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Keisha Pollack-Porter, and thank you all for your presentations and for your time.
Great, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Michelle and Danetta, for a great job moderating the session, and thank you for your commentary. Thanks for keeping us on time. I want to just thank everybody for those presentations. They were outstanding, and if you have questions for any of our presenters, I encourage you to reach out to them afterwards. I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Gaskin, our director, to send his goodbyes or his thanks for the day, and so thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Keisha. And as I did before, earlier, I thank the team for putting together. I think we've had just a great day of talks on thinking about it from both research to translation, to practice in the community. And so I want to just thank you all for joining us today. Please fill out the poll that's in front of you regarding the symposium. I am trying to wonder what in the world is going to look like after we come out of this pandemic, because we just have learned so many tools and begun to communicate with each other in so many different ways. I would like to also just say I appreciate all of you all that just gave your lightning talks. I found all of your work very fascinating, and as we as a center try to move towards solutions and not just studying disparities, but solutions. It tells me that I am amongst scholars and community leaders that are of the same mind, that it's time for just sort of observing the fact that things that vulnerable populations are at risk, but now we need to begin to do something, and you all are pointing us in the direction to do it. I again appreciate all of you all for participating. Thank you to our community leaders who gave us a wonderful session prior to this. And I want to thank Michelle and Donetta for leading the last session. So, and I also want to acknowledge that we've had our program officers from NIH and IMHD on, both Dr. Linares and Dr. Sayre. And so please feel free to reach out and talk to contacts at NIH about your work. And if you need me to help facilitate that, reach out to me, and I will certainly try to help to make that connection. So it is 3:58 by my clock. I'd like to at least say I gave you something today, so I'm going to give you a minute. So I'll give you a minute back. And so everyone, please have a good day. Thank you, Chantel, for doing being in the background. And so everyone, please have a great day.